about rare diseases, but rare diseases are really just the other side of the coin of common diseases. As we learn more about, let's say, even like a common, like I said, cancer, it's really many, many different diseases, and we are trying to hone in now, as you know, with precision personalized medicine to help people in a more targeted way, rather than just kind of throwing things at them and seeing what works, right? So rare diseases. So I started with the rare diseases, and a lot of the patient groups came to me, and they are, of course, a really tough community. They want to be a community, and they get so much out of being a community, because it can be very isolating to having a rare disease, because your neighbors will say, what do you have? And your primary care doctor will be puzzled and say, I've never seen anything like this before. So it could be isolating. But the good news is with technology now, people can find each other. There's social media, and they can work together. And that alone is a lot of comfort for families. So now then they form these groups, and then they come to us and say, how can we actually make sure that we get a treatment for our disease? We are a small group, we have a very little funding. How do we do this? It's sort of a different way of thinking about community engagement. They are a community. They're just not a community in one place. They're an online community, but they have a very strong sense of shared experiences and community. So they came and said, so, how do I get researchers in my area? How do I figure out, how I can make a difference? How can I get a clinical research study started? How can I get a treatment? Ultimately, everybody wants a treatment, right? So in order to not having sort of one-off conversations and trying to help people out individually, which is, of course, not really scalable, we thought, how can we make this a little bit more scalable to give people, have this great information that is out there and share it more easily? And so we had this being led by patient groups. So we specifically did not say, okay, we tried to do this from the NIH, but we had a committee of a lead team of patient representatives, people who have personal experience with rare diseases, and we had probably over 100 people work on this in phone calls, by email. And the idea was that they would figure out what their needs are and provide sort of a one-stop online portal where you could find the information. So it should be usable, accessible, and practical. And the bottom line is that it turns out, as we thought about this, a lot of the things that ended up in this portal are actually not only useful for rare disease, they're useful for all people who want to somehow understand the process and understand how they can engage with it. That's why I wanted to tell you about it. And we just launched it, and you can, if you Google like toolkit, you can see it. And it is, that's the link, and I think the slides, please, feel free to share them. I hope you'll check it out and give us some feedback and see if you find it useful. So our guiding principles were that there has to be, synergy. So now we have, there's actually over 7,000 rare diseases, and the number is increasing. So if for each disease people have to reinvent the wheel, that's obviously really hard and not really sustainable and scalable. So the idea is that they can exchange information. We wanted a single portal. We wanted to convene the different partners also. So it turned out that a lot of these groups actually learn from each other. At our meeting, I didn't really have to say anything. It was the community exchanging information with each other. It was really, really interesting. And I was just telling Meryl about this. So one of the things that came up in that forum as people were exchanging information was that they said, to be part of a rare disease community is really difficult, because, having a child, let's say, with a very severe, disabling rare condition is a huge strain on people's time, on people's finances. And on top of that, to be able to, engage online and figure out what research is and start a foundation or be part of a foundation is really challenging. So they were saying, we need to really also make sure that, everybody who is facing rare diseases gets access to these kinds of groups. And rare diseases affect all kinds of people and everybody in the population. So we need to make sure that we think about also how we can engage not only sort of a self-selected community of people online, but like everybody who's affected. And I think that's something we really want to work on at NCATS as well, at the NIH. We wanted to facilitate coordination and also promote really a continuity. So a lot of times, let's say one of these patient communities, they may say that they want to get research started and want to work towards a cure by starting to collect some information on their disease. Sometimes in these very rare diseases, it's not even known what the disease exactly looks like. So collecting, like having a registry and collecting information. So that ends up somewhere in some database, right? And then maybe at a medical center, a researcher collects information. That ends up in some database. And then maybe later a pharmaceutical company finally comes and says, we may have a treatment for this, and collects some data. And all these data are never connected. So continuity, because there's not enough people around, not enough resources around. So we need to make sure that we leverage each other's investments and efforts, and that we have some continuity there. So, and it has to be simple, so that it's actually accessible to people. So if you look at the website, you see that it's organized in 4 different areas that have to do with translation. And again, translation means bringing a discovery to health benefits. It's just a long word, but that's what it means, of course. And what it needs is preparing for clinical trials, because clinical trials are needed to test new treatments, then getting to regulatory review, and then also what do you do once something is approved? How do you get it into the last step? How do you actually get it to patients? How do you make sure that clinicians prescribe it and patients have access to it, right? So these 4 areas, and then if you go there on this website, you can click on each of these and then find a bunch of tools and hopefully useful information to engage with the process. So there's also a Getting Started tab that is sort of like a navigation tool that you could use if you're not sure where to go. And I now switch over to the CTSA program. I just want to give you some examples on community engaged research in the CTSA program, the Clinical and Translational Science Award program. So the goals here for us, and these were developed by the community in a way with input from working groups and ultimately initially the Institute of Medicine report. The goals are to develop and expand existing models for stakeholder engagement. So how can we advance the science of this, the process of this, how we can make sure we engage stakeholders in collaboration. And we really want to promote that this happens across the entire spectrum. So it's not good enough to just engage the community at the last step when you want them to participate in some project. No, that does not work. It has to be across the entire spectrum, from the beginning of something that to make sure that the questions matter to the community, that the process is appropriate, and that will ultimately just give us more impact and better results. And this requires team science, as you all know. So we need to also work on in the culture of these academic, historically kind of academically organized places. How do you give credit to people from different parts of that ecosystem, not only the faculty, but also the community members who participate and others who participate? And how do you find sort of the right incentives for everybody, the right resources for everybody, and make sure that everybody knows how to work as a team and that team science is rewarded. This is reflected in our funding opportunity now, because there's a lot of government abbreviations, but essentially, when we give out grants, they have to have an announcement. If you look that up online, you can see that we have community engagement in this announcement defined very broadly. And this was written when Meharry was there, and I think she contributed to this and helped make sure that we get, the sort of the input into this. And it's here really about looking at it across, as I said, the scientific spectrum, and making sure that we have this integrated into the academic model. And this is, I think, the unique opportunity of this program, the Clinical and Translational Science Award program, because it is at this intersection between research, education, healthcare, communities. So it's really a unique opportunity to connect the dots and to bring these different perspectives and these different opportunities together. And now just a few examples. Again, there's so many to choose from. This is from Colorado, where they have this boot camp idea. So the idea is that in this, I think, as you can see, it came from the community out of a lot of sort of a grassroots idea, out of focus groups. And the idea is that you bring people together and essentially help them understand kind of the language and to get the resources and the process information that they need. And so the early outcomes are promising here. Another initiative that is coming out of the CTSA program, and you see here sort of a more graphic depiction of this, how this comes together and brings community members in sort of from the beginning in this boot camp fashion. Another example comes from your work, Consuelo, where these kind of studios are launched on a project, sort of almost like a focus group, but more than that, a dynamic roundtable session where the different stakeholders come together and give feedback on a project. And this is, has shown to be really valued by researchers and the communities. And one example I think that you have shown is where somebody wanted to get better hypertension treatment for a community, and then surprisingly, even though that seems to be something that the community should benefit from, it was difficult for this researcher to get people to participate because they had this kind of information on the study, and they figured out if they had the information presented in a more accessible way that was more speaking to this community, that they had much better success at engaging the community. And then a third example from California, where a multiple sclerosis researcher, Dr. Ameskua, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, essentially started off doing research in multiple sclerosis, being interested in the genetics and other kind of more scientific factors in her laboratory. But then as she realized and went into her community there, she realized that there were a lot of difficulties for that particular Latino community to really benefit from new treatments and live with the disease. So she ended up focusing to some degree on that because she had that opportunity, and she's shown here being honored for her work by the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, and was able to really enrich her research through engaging her community. So the final last example I want to give you from the CTSA program is what we call a Recruitment Innovation Center. And of course, recruitment refers to recruiting participants into clinical research studies. Clinical research studies are necessary to bring better treatments. So if we all just try something and 1,000 doctors across the country or nurses do something, and the information is not really brought together and followed and collected, it's lost. And then, a lot of what we do is sort of trial and error. So we have to have clinical studies where we have certain controls, kind of a protocol, and we follow people. So that's really a critical step in getting better treatments to patients. However, when we do these studies, then a lot of times people don't participate. So historically, that has been a problem, because I think what many communities felt was that the researchers would come to at the last moment, they would do everything, get a protocol ready, and then they would say, here, now you have to participate, surely you want this, right? And then that was kind of too late. So we need to make a very different kind of effort, sincere effort from the beginning to include communities as active partners, not just as consumers at the end of the product that we think they should want, but as very active partners from the beginning. And to that effect, we've launched the Recruitment Innovation Center. And the goal here is to essentially fix that issue, help that we have the right kinds of study that the community actually wants, that answers the question that is relevant to the community, and that the community actually has an input on what the protocols look like, and ultimately benefits from the results and participates. And there's two pieces to this. One piece is it's operational technology piece. So how do you find out where potential participants are? So that's informatics, using the electronic medical record increasingly. And the other piece is then how to actually connect the potential participants with the research opportunity. And so there's a sort of a community engagement piece to this and a data piece. And the goal here was to connect the two. That's the critical opportunity. There, I think, again, the CTSA program is uniquely positioned because we have these kind of very different fields kind of come together and work together. This is a big problem. So, when I was doing clinical research myself, I just realized how difficult it was to get patients to participate. So many barriers, even if you engage people from the beginning and make sure the protocol is right and everything, a lot of barriers for participation. Like it's just like the burden and the travel sometimes and everything. It's hard. So then when I came to the NIH, I realized it was not just in my area where a lot of the patients are very disabled physically, so that's what was part of the problem, but it was across all kinds of studies, and even in diseases where you wouldn't think there should be such a barrier. So before I was in this job, I worked for the Neurology Institute, right? And we had, for example, studies on stroke, and stroke is such a common, terrible condition. It's so common in this country, unfortunately, and we had to go and recruit patients in Europe and Asia because we couldn't do it in this country. I mean, like some of them in this country, but I was thinking there's something wrong. And I found out that it's actually very common problem. So most or almost all of the NIH studies that are clinical studies that recruit patients have major delays. So, and as you know, there's so much work needs to be done. Research is so important, and resources are not unlimited. So, if an NIH investment, it's a taxpayer investment, like it's all of our money, right? It's made into research, and the research is very, very delayed or even failed completely because it can't happen because people don't participate. Something is wrong. And so we can't get the medical evidence we all need. We can't get new treatments if we don't fix this problem. And a lot of the research dollars that all of us would love to be have spent on science, on community engagement, go into these studies that then are so slow and eat up a lot of resources because they just don't really work. So a big problem, that affects a large proportion of clinical studies, and where we are now trying to help address, sort of fix the process, make it better, both in the informatics as well as in the sort of strategic engagement arena. And it's about innovation, education, outreach, engagement, and then also bringing the whole network in. So we have the advantage of having a lot of local strength and history of, a lot of good work having been done already, a lot of great demonstration projects already that we hope to bring together with this. So it's about engagement and trust. That's the key tenets in everything we do, right? I mean, I think some of this is really that there's the trust is not there between, the community and the research project. And that's in particular critical, I think, at this point in time when we have all these big data available. So it's, of course, it's one thing, I'm so glad I can go to another city and I can get money out of the ATM if I need it, because otherwise I'd be stuck, right? And the reason why that works is because I somehow, it's not great, but I take the risk and I know that I kind of make banks connect and exchange my information. But I take that chance for this convenience that I can get money wherever I want. In medicine, that doesn't work that way. If you go to one doctor, the next is one hospital, the next, it's never any connection. And of course, it's more scary in medicine because it's our personal information, but we're also losing out on a lot of things. So I think that's why this is so key, such a key time to do this. I mean, this is a great opportunity of our time. So how do we bring this advance that has transformed all of the other aspects of our life, how we stay in touch with friends, how we get money out of the machine, everything has changed in the last 10 years. Well, medicine, not so much, right? So this is the key opportunity in the right time, but it's a trust issue. And we need to make sure that we hear the community, that we hear how they want to have, be informed about what happens with their data, have the autonomy in making these decisions. And I think that's why this is such a key opportunity here. So we need meaningful engagement, and some of the examples that I just showed you from the different CTSA hubs are really useful here. And so how can we have culturally tailored material and inclusive approach, really? And this then will lead to a feeling of safety when these kinds of data are being used. It has to be fair, honest, there has to be great communication, and we have to work with the people who are able to, who understand, who are part of the communities that we're trying to reach, because they are the only ones who can understand the environment and the whole psychosocial tenets of that community. So the one example of how this happens is that we are creating an advisory board, and we talked just earlier about how, of course, this is such a complex issue and program. So we have many local and regional great collaborations already, great strength. So how do we take this to the sort of national level and make sure that it all sort of has synergy and works together? And this is being done, among other things, through this advisory board, which basically has patients, caregivers, and from different backgrounds, not only academicians and researchers on it. And we have in particular a focus on additional funding for making sure that there is minority recruitment as part of this, and training also for people to, that the next generation of researchers makes this part of their research. So in closing, I'm sorry, when it's 2 minutes over maybe, we really believe at NCATS and at the NIH that it is very important that we partner collaboratively with community, with stakeholders across the entire spectrum, not just at the end of a research project, that we consider the interests of our partners, provide training and resources to our partners to be able to engage, and then share information and knowledge with everybody. So thank you so much for your attention.